advisor of Ashwood, An Ode to the Wolf in Sheep's Clothing by Aseop. The village of Ashwood sat wedged between misted forests and jagged cliffs, a cluster of crooked houses whose chimneys smoked like tired lungs. Lanterns hung from posts like wary eyes, their dull light struggling to cast light through the fog. The cobblestones wound through the town in uneven spirals, as if the earth itself had shifted them in a bad dream. The villagers were simple folk, used to the caprice of wind and rain. Yet they prided themselves on resilience, each family bound to the next by labor, gossip, and shared superstition. Then he arrived. It was during the village's meager harvest festival, when the air smelled of smoke and cider and overripe apples. The stranger appeared at the edge of the village, dressed in a coat of midnight velvet, boots polished to a mirror shine, a walking shadow of elegance. His hair gleamed dark as the forest at midnight, and his eyes, pale, precise, seemed to see every crooked stone, every worried glance. "I am Alaric," he said, voice smooth like polished wood, "and I believe Ashwood has untapped promise." The villagers squinted, unsure. He had the charm of sunlight on fog, yet carried an undercurrent of cold. But he offered solutions: irrigation channels, new trade routes, repaired bridges. He suggested planting faster-growing crops, organizing patrols against wolf packs, even rationing some grain to save the poorest families. By winter, the village flourished. Fields bloomed with unexpected yield. Livestock grew plump. Merchants arrived more frequently, drawn by word of Ashwood's bounty. The villagers whispered praise of Alaric, and eventually even the usually wary elders nodded their approval. Mayor Corbin, a man of ambition and swollen pride, declared him the village's official advisor. Alaric smiled as he took the position. At first, he appeared devoted to the village's well-being, attending festivals, helping repair roofs after storms, and advising families in financial matters. He knew when to laugh and when to bow. He moved through Ashwood like sunlight glinting off a blade, beautiful, warm, and yet sharp enough to cut. At night, however, the village changed. Smoke curled from chimneys in unnatural shapes. Livestock were found drained, hollowed, eyes still starring. People whispered about disappearances, but Alaric was ever present during the day, hands on the mayor's shoulder, smiling, pointing out the new prosperity. "Perhaps it is wolves," he suggested when asked about the missing sheep, "or wild dogs from the forest. They are clever, yes, but nothing we cannot manage. We'll step up patrols at night to ensure the safety of all." And the villagers believed him. Why would they doubt a man who had already doubled their harvest, helped them shift from survival to prosperity? The first time a villager disappeared, none suspected Alaric. A child wandering too far into the fog, a farmer caught by a misstep in the river tragedy, they said, nothing more. But at night, the child walked again. Eyes pale, skin unnaturally cold, teeth sharp in a faint, predatory grin. Alaric had claimed him. Slowly, methodically, He built a network of the turned, villagers who awoke at night, unrecognizable, yet still familiar enough to walk among the living until called. Elder Marlowe, who had lived in Ashwood for 73 winters, began to murmur about the forest and the stranger. "He is not what he seems," he said, voice quivering like the last leaf in autumn. But his words fell on ears drunk with gratitude and wealth. "Alaric brought us fortune," Mayor Corbin snapped, "and you will not sully that with baseless fear." Wells turned into months, and the missing multiplied. Families awoke to empty houses, doors locked, windows dark. By night, faint cries echoed through the mist, but the villagers were convinced it was the wind, the forest, the clever tricks of children. None suspected Alaric's growing web of silent predators, his turned minions who drifted from house to house while the village slept. One evening, Elise, the blacksmith's daughter, noticed her reflection in a pool of rainwater. The stranger's eyes shimmered in her vision, flicking behind her shoulder. She turned quickly. The streets were empty. The fog swirled around her, dense and sentient, as if the village itself were watching. Something shifted in the shadows. She ran home, heart hammering, but even then she told no one, fearing they would call her foolish. Alaric moved with precision. He advised the mayor to expand the town's borders, strengthen walls, build new markets, all things the villagers wanted and believed. In daylight, Ashwood prospered more than it ever had. In darkness, it weakened. Those who slept never woke. Those who wandered too far at night vanished without a trace. Children and livestock alike were taken quietly, methodically, leaving no blood, only an unsettling hollowness. By the third moon after Alaric's arrival, the village had fundamentally changed. Few went to the market freely. Fewer still spoke to one another. The fog never lifted. Lanterns swayed with unseen currents, casting twisted shadows on the cobblestones. Alaric's minions moved unseen, sometimes glimpsed in doorways, sometimes in mirrors, always just beyond recognition. Even the mayor had begun to pale, his eyes shining too brightly in certain light, his skin cold to the touch. He had become one of Alaric's, a lieutenant of the night. Then the night came when Alaric's web no longer required subtlety. A wind like sighing bones blew through Ashwood. Shadows stretched long across houses and streets. The turned emerged from doors, chimneys, and forest edges, faces pale, teeth glinting. The villagers screamed, realizing too late that the stranger and his flock were the source of every disappearance. Families were dragged into the mist, homes torn open, livestock devoured. Fire and claws became the language of the night, and Ashwood's cobblestones drank the lifeblood of its citizens. Elise stood frozen in the bloodbath. She spotted two small figures huddled under a wagon, not attacking like the others. No hiding. Squinting through the haze, she recognized two children, Ella and Thomas, the miller's children. Without thinking, Elise sprinted forward as she called out to the children. Ella practically leapt into her arms, while Thomas clung to her legs. Together, they fled into the forest, the screams of the village rising behind them like a living thing. They dared not look back. they finally risked it, the village lay shrouded in orange fog, lanterns still flickering feebly. Shadows moved among the curling wisps. The rooftops glimmered with eyes, pale and hungry. Ashwood had become a domain of the night, ruled by Alaric and his growing brood. The three ran until their lungs burned and their feet bled, until the twisted trees of the forest swallowed them in darkness. Behind them, the village thrummed with life, but not the kind they knew. The wind carried whispers, faint but unmistakable, of laughter and hunger. The streets alive with predators who smiled in the sunlight, only to feast in the shadows. Elise saw what happened. Thomas hiccuped through his sobs. Elise whispered, her voice trembling, "Appearances can be deceiving." And she knew in her heart that the prosperity, the harvests, the bridges and markets, everything Alaric had touched with his charm had been bait. Wealth, safety, even friendship had been tools to blind them, to earn trust, to make betrayal taste sweeter. Ashwood was gone, and no one remained to mourn it, except the few who had escaped. But Alaric watched, always watching, from the highest tower of the mayor's mansion, hair dark as midnight, eyes bright as pale lanterns. He smiled. The village thrived in a manner of speaking, and the night had only just begun. Moral of the story: appearances can be deceiving. Deception can lead to death.